8 feet above grade is a traditional meter box with a meter for the electrical services. So we had previously described that this is being proposed to fill an issue with coverage at the interchange of Route 4 and I-90, and in particular, all of the lanes of I-90 roughly westbound of Route 4. And so it's basically, if you would, it's largely shooting down the on-ramp onto I-90, but covering the entire area. So that's the quick overview of what's being proposed at 37 feet tall. What I'm going to do next is show, we were asked and we did prepare some simulations. I'm going to pull those up here in a moment. And so these are the simulations. So the site again is right here. Here's the Hampton Inn, here's the Cracker Barrel, and the off and on ramp, and the proposed pole being here. For the Hampton Inn's benefit, it's on the other side of the tree line. And we did simulations looking, I'll call it southbound on Route 4, roughly northwest from Route 4, and just coming off the off ramp. And so what I'll do is I'll scroll through these. But again, my primary focus was to talk about some alternatives that were discussed. So this is, again, looking south on Route 4 across the intersection. Here's that pole line that crosses. And then this is with the proposed pole simulated in here. The next one is taken from the off-ramp, showing the turn lanes going north and southbound on 4. This is the tree line, the fence, and the pole would be sitting here in front of the tree line on this corner. And then finally, this is on Route 4 looking north, approaching the left-hand turn to get on the eastbound lanes of 90, and we're going to be looking over in here. And it would be sitting here. This is 37 feet tall, so this tree, in comparison, maybe that's 3/4 the height or 2/3, but roughly that tree is probably roughly topping out or roughly around 50 feet here. So based upon the discussion that was had in the field, I'm going to put up here there was a discussion about, and I apologize, this isn't the best shot, but here's the proposed pole. This is Route 4. Here's the tree line. Here is the angle of the fence, goes like this, and here's the overhead lines. There was a discussion with the chairman and I apologize, I don't have the copy of those notes, but Rob, Rick, and another member of the board about considering sliding the pole down here, again on DOT property on this side of the trees, and taking it out of this grassy area here. What I'm going to do is switch over to, one second here, switch over to Google View and show you what that looks like on Google View. Okay, so this is Google Earth. I'm just going to rotate here. This is looking north on 4. This is roughly in this area, the proposed location, and the initial proposed location, and roughly in this area along the side of the fence is where this is being proposed. So instead of the wires leaving this pole, or it actually might have been this pole and coming to the north, they would probably hop off this pole and come on this side of the fence here. And so that was the proposal. What it does do is presents possibly that we might need, because of this tree and some of the other trees, a taller pole to see over the trees. But the discussion, I'll maybe ask the chair and Rick to elaborate, was to, instead of having it out in this grassy area, where there is a concern about visibility is to put it along the fence line in the DOT property, but in this area here. And I'm just going to stop sharing here so I can speak. I feel like I'm not speaking to you. But really, my purpose of the call tonight is, having had that discussion with just a few of the members, I was looking to discuss that concept with the remainder of the board and see if that's where the board wanted to take it, because it's we have to go back to DOT and seek an amendment to our permit, and then obviously revise the drawings and things like that. And so, if on balance, I guess what I having been through this plenty of times, I don't want to play whack-a-mole, which is take this and show up with it in 4 weeks and then have a different member of the board have a different opinion. So if this is the direction the board is heading, that there's not traction for the initially proposed location, but this one to slid to the south is preferred. We're happy to investigate that and seek the approvals from DOT and present it back to this board. But I guess I don't want to start at square one in 4 weeks after we go through that process and find out there's folks who don't like that. So and with that, I don't know if the chair has anything else. Because I wasn't there, I don't want to gloss over anything, but I think that was accurate.
That was very good. Thank you, David. And Tom Hickey was the other member there in the field with us. So that's a good synopsis of what it was. We had reviewed potentially 2 other locations, one up by Denny's, very close to I-90, to try and fill in the hole there. But Rick had mentioned that there was that had been looked at. There was just no way to access it with maintenance vehicles. And then the other corner of the I-90 interchange north of the access to I-90 was discussed, but it seemed to be a preferred next approach to be right where you had shown it, along that fence line, still in the DOT right away. Rick was going to go back. There was a discussion that the proposed antenna would have been mostly blocked to the south and southwest by that tree as it was proposed originally. So a lot of the signal would have been blocked by that tree, but it was agreed that if a nominal height increase with the revised location was necessary, it did make sense. It was not discussed that the tower or the antenna would stick up completely above that tree on the corner there. But that was something that Rick needed to look into as far as the RF interference from the tree or not.
Yeah, I think that the RF interference issue with that tree is the primary need and focus on this site is to shoot to the north and to the northwest and cover I-90. And so with the tree to the south behind it, possibly impeding the signal, was not the primary, was not as much of a concern as it would be as blocking the main path of the signal where we primarily want to cover. So, again, we don't have the luxury of building things that don't work. And I can give you some examples of things that we have built that don't work, and much more expensive than this. And, I hear about it for a decade later about why this site in the town of Colony that's beneath the trees and doesn't work was built, and, all sorts of things. So that's the tension that exists here, is Rick will look at it and come back with what is needed for an RF perspective. But I do think it's at the end going to be higher than 37 feet to clear that foliage and function. And, and maybe on balance between the two, if you end up going back to the first alternative, that's not going to break my heart. But I just wanted to make sure that if this is the direction the board is asking us to go in, I don't want to find out in 4 weeks that 2 of them, and it doesn't sound like it, but that there's 2 or 3 of the members don't like this idea, because in fairness, you all weren't out at that site visit. But if that's where the board wants to go, we will do that work and look to come back on I think it's again the 20. I think the 14th is probably too aggressive, and I think I heard that you may not have a meeting that night, but probably the 28th of March, we could come back in with all of this and present it. But again, I was just looking to avoid surprises in an effort to find compromise and find something that works for everyone.
Agreed. And I'll turn it over to the members in a second. The only other piece of the technical aspect that we did ask Rick to look into too was the actual power source and the needs from National Grid. There was a little concern that the electric out there is only primary and not secondary service, so a transformer might be needed. And we wanted to see how National Grid was going to service this pole site with secondary power, because if they need their own additional pole to provide a transformer, we just wanted to have that as part of the record and decision before it goes forward. So just wanted to add that in. And we'll also open it up to the public too momentarily. I'm just going to go in order just because it's Zoom and it's a little complicated. Tom, you're in my first box. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think I have two questions, and I think I know the answer to the first one. The trees are in the right of way, right? Because we were proposing on each side of the tree to still be in the right of way. So I'm assuming the trees are in the right of way.
Yeah, the trees appear to be on the DOT side of that right-of-way fencing, yes.
And then relative to that, who would be responsible for kind of the tree maintenance, the height maintenance to avoid having to get it too high to make up for any growth that would occur in the near future?
That's an interesting question. The tree maintenance, because it's a tree in the DOT right away, I suppose we would have to go back if the tree grew to the point that it was impeding the signal. It's on the one hand, we've had this discussion on other sites. Trees don't grow taller every year forever. Eventually they settle into where they're going to be, and they live their lives. And so it's not necessarily true that it's going to grow taller, but certainly it's possible. But I think that would be on Verizon to do that trimming if it grew by seeking permission from DOT.
I'm less concerned about the maintenance than I am about making it so high to account for any growth that might take place, and how that would be balanced.
Sure. I don't think our intention was not to come in with here's what we need, plus a measure of safety for growth. It was here's what we need to put us in a position that works with the tree as it exists today, within reason. So it's not as if we're going to come in with a 100-foot pole and go, we're worried about the tree growing 25 more feet. It was intended to be to factor in where it is now.
And Jeff, if I recall at the meeting, I think the number was 43 or 45 feet was the current height of the estimated height of that tree. And that was also with it being a little bit down in the hollow a little more as well, right?
Yeah, there was some discussion of how tall that tree was. And I also suspect, as David mentioned, that tree is probably 50 years old already, dating to this 1970-ish construction of I-90. So that tree species does not look like a silver maple that's going to grow to 100 feet. It might be topped out as it is. So something to consider.
That's all I had.
Thank you. Matt, have you next?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I don't think I have any additional questions for David. I think Dave was concerned, in my opinion, on is this a better site than the initial one? And I would say yes. I like the way it blocks when the traffic comes up the ramp. I think that was probably my biggest concern. When you're going either direction on Route 4, I think it provides better cover than we were initially. So if David's looking for my, whether we should proceed or not, I'm supportive of that piece of it, to look at what that could be. The height obviously could be an issue, but it sounds like to me we're gonna figure that one out next time we get together. So
sounds good. Thank you, Bob.
I pretty much echo everything that Matt just said. Unfortunately, I was unable to go to the field visit. I was out of town, but based on what I'm seeing tonight, Dave, you did a good job of presenting what was the original and then what the revised. I'm in full support of the revised proposal. I think it's a good balancing act. I think it's a good approach to it. I'm in favor for it.
Excellent. Thanks, Bob. Scott.
Nothing additional. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
All right, just making sure I'm getting a weird signal, but nothing additional. I echo everything you guys have said. I don't want Dave going away for a month and chasing his tail. I like exactly the way it was discussed tonight, and I'm looking forward to the 28th when we get back together to hopefully wrap this up.
Sounds good. Dave, anything you want to add quick, or I'll open it up to the rest of the public?
Nope, that's, I think we've covered it all pretty efficiently tonight. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good job, Dan.
Thank you. Any members of the public wish to speak tonight? Alex, I believe you wanted to.
Yes, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, so for anybody who wasn't on the call, my name is Alex Bentley. I'm the general manager of the Hampton Inn in East Greenbush at 25 Hampton Inn Drive. Sort of filling in as a representative for my corporate office. I am newer to my role as well, so if it seems like I'm asking a silly question, just bear with me.
No worries.
Would you speak a little bit slower? Sorry about that. Just a little bit slower.
Oh, okay, sorry, is this okay?
Yeah, it's just our stenographer, Alex. Sometimes she has trouble picking it up, so that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try and
She
speak a
asked-
little bit slowly on this.
Good. She asked me to slow down all the time, so no worries.
Okay. So one of my questions was actually in concern of the potential power draw that it could have, but I know that you guys are looking to follow up with National Grid. I've provided my email to Allison Lovely. I've been in contact with her. If I could just be included on what that outcome would be, just because it obviously it could pose potential issues at the hotel. Let me see here. Now, after seeing the plans that David presented tonight, I've got no problem with the area where it should be designated. But if I understood from the previous call 2 weeks ago, the fact that it is a Verizon tower, it could possibly interfere with other cell phone carriers. Is that still correct, or am I incorrect?
No, I think the discussion at the last meeting was that the microcell is essentially Verizon service only. It won't interfere with other carriers, but it won't by default carry their 5G signal. Is that correct, David?
That is correct. Everyone has separately licensed frequency bands, so there's no interference with other carriers or even other equipment, Wi-Fi or any of those things. I mean, it's not as if the town of East Greenbush doesn't have cell phone coverage pretty much all over. We're basically trying to spackle and fill some holes, but it is using our existing frequencies and will not interfere with other carriers or other equipment. And as far as and if you don't mind, I'll just answer the other question on the power draw. It's pretty de minimis. A full-size cell tower, basically, we would say draws as much as a single-family home. This is a much smaller scale with smaller power requirements. And so as the chairman was discussing, it goes off of not off the primary power, but off the secondary line, much like would feed a house. And so it's a very small amount of power. It's it's stronger than a Wi-Fi, in the hotel, but it's not a significant draw. So there's no need to upgrade the electrical service or worry about power usage. But in fairness, I do think the chairman has asked a reasonable question about how's National Grid going to serve it to drop the high voltage down to secondary.
Thank you, David. In your opinion, would the hotel sitting down in the valley below the tower pick up enhanced service from this microcell? Should it go in?
I would think definitely, particularly in this location where we're either location, but definitely with the newer location that's being discussed, there would be certainly, they'd benefit from real improvements in speed with Verizon service.
Okay, thank you, David.
I'm sorry, I missed your first name. Do you mind repeating it?
Alex.
Okay, I'm sorry, I did actually have it correct. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you for answering them. And that was it. So thank you.
Thank you, Alex. We appreciate it. We do have one comment from a member of the public. Is there any way to disguise it as an evergreen tree? I've seen that done in other areas of the country without being an impediment to maintenance. Would assume that cherry pickers would be used to reach any of the equipment that would be in need of repair. I believe because this is microcell, David, actually, you want to address that? Sure.
Sure. Yeah, this is a microcell, or what's called a small cell site, which is where we typically try to put these on existing power poles. And at the initial presentations we went through with the zoning board, there's an awful lot of existing telephone poles in this area, but National Grid has sometimes they're onerous requirements about what poles we can and can't go on. And to our dismay, we're left with, despite all of the poles, having to propose a new wooden utility pole. But to the question, we do stealth monopine towers, but to build one of those here, it's I think it's $160,000. But the bigger thing is that's on a traditional 100-foot or so cell tower with a full set of antennas, and that requires an extensive foundation. And basically it's a monopole that's then disguised as a tower. So that is, if we were trying to deploy a full-size tower here, that certainly might be in the discussions with the heights we're talking, but in this particular case, it's not the right tool for what we're trying to do.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else from the public wish to speak regarding this appeal tonight? I'm seeing or hearing none. I do want to just go through one procedural point. David, I know you guys asked for a handful of waivers, most of which we still need to look through once we get through finalizing the proposal. But the one waiver of application fees I do think is relevant tonight. So for members of the board, the applicant has requested consideration of a waiver of the application fee, which is typically based on a large monopole, as David had just mentioned, the large cell tower structures we see around town, with this one being a little different. They have asked for a waiver to drop down to just the smaller co-location fee, even though essentially this is a new location going in. It will not be co-located. They're asking for consideration of that reduced fee, which drops from an application fee of $5,000 down to $2,500. And I wanted to open that up for discussion as part of this appeal.
Yes, I'd be happy to quickly elaborate. So yeah. This is because it's a new wooden pole under the definition of tower. It's being treated by the building department code enforcement officer as a new tower. And so under your chapter that deals with telecommunications, a new tower has an application fee of $5,000. If we were putting this on an existing telephone pole, it would be $2,500. The problem we have is your town and a couple others use a particularly onerous code provision written by a particular consultant. And it has, for instance, it has escrow fees for the consultant at, I think it's $7,500 if you were using someone that needs to be deposited. And it has very high application fees. So I don't have your fee schedule in front of me, but if I were to guess, a typical application for a variance is $250, a special permit's $500, but for some reason we have some extra zeros always thrown on telecommunications. And our position has always been that the application fees are supposed to be set to basically balance out or capture the community's cost of processing an application. And at $5,000, you're not even using, I just don't see where it's 10 times as expensive as a traditional special use permit. And so we're asking for some measure of relief from that down to the co-location fee of $2,500, which I still think is on balance a bit of a windfall as compared to, this is no different than any other special permit or variance application that takes a couple of meetings that you see month in and month out in front of the board.
It's a good summary. Thank you. Questions, discussion amongst the board members?
Jeff, are you proposing or are you saying that that fee is something that we will weigh in on or make a decision on, or?
Yes, we've been asked by the applicant to consider that waiver amongst a handful of other technical waivers because as Mr. Brennan indicated, there's a lot of requirements that really are much more applicable to a large 120 foot tall steel cell tower rather than this utility pole installation that is still defined as a tower by code enforcement. So this is one of the waivers, and I felt like we could have this discussion tonight and maybe put forward a motion to accept this one waiver ahead of the others.
I've been on the zoning board for a long time. I've never been asked this, and I was just wondering, maybe Bill could weigh in on this. Is this on our purview? Being able to waive and change fees, and I'm not saying I'm not open-minded to it. I just want to make sure procedurally we're doing the right thing here.
So just one quick thing before Bill hops on is, so your telecommunications provisions are in a separate standalone chapter of the town code outside of the zoning law. And those provisions were set by local law by the town board. And in there is a provision, I think it's actually not called a waiver, but actually might be entitled relief, which says that any of the provisions within this chapter can be waived upon good cause or showing by the zoning board. So there is actual provision in there. It's a little unique. I would agree. Typically, it's the town board sets a fee schedule every year and we would be bound by it. But in this particular case, there is, and there is support for that, that's very specific. The other waivers, as the chairman was discussing, deal with things like a new tower. You're supposed to do a geotechnical analysis. They bring out a drill rig with the split spoon and hammer and take a soil sample and show what the bearing capacity is. You're supposed to provide a foundation design and structural report. Well, for a telephone pole, the standard is you do 10% of the height of the pole plus 2 feet. So you get, there's a standard burial depth for a pole. Our antenna, by way of comparison, is about 50 pounds. The smallest transformer on a pole is 250 pounds if you go and look up the specs. And so there's just some things on the technical side that are geared towards a traditional true, monopole 120 foot tall tower that we were asking for waivers for. But we kind of choked a little bit on the $5,000 price tag for an application fee for something that is, on balance, fairly simple and non-controversial.
And Bob,
Dave,
Bob,
thanks.
getting back to your question, the applicant made this waiver request part of their application, so it is something to be considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals. Again, it's up to the board to determine whether or not they're willing to grant this particular part of the application with a partial waiver of the application fee. Again, it's separate and distinct from the rest of the application. So.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is your legal advice or your stance on this to the board is it's okay for us to rule on it or to make a judgment on it, and it's
Yes,
binding.
it is.
Okay,
Yes, it is.
thank you.
Thank you both. Matt?
Bob,
Jeff, reasonable request in my opinion.
Thank you, Scott. Matt?
yeah, I guess the way I'm thinking about it is we're almost being questioned about, is it a tower or not a tower almost, right? To some degree, I think it's almost an interpretation is how I thought about it, Bob, a little bit. And the cost just ties to that interpretation. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of how that's how I'm thinking about it, Bob. If that may be wrong, but that's probably how I'll lead into it.
Oh, I'm not here to debate whether it's right. I just want a legal opinion on whether we're acting on something and it's in our purview. I'm not a lawyer. We have one on our staff, and I trust his opinion.
Yeah, makes sense.
That was good. Hey, Tom?
I think that the only question I have is if to put forth a motion on that in advance of actually granting the variance seems a bit like putting the cart before the horse on it. And maybe it should be considered all inclusive at the same time.
Yeah, the only reason we kind of digested it and thought it was accurate timing is it is a waiver request that comes as part of the pre-application, and it is a waiver of the application fee itself. So the application fee, obviously, the fee should have accompanied the original application, but because of that request for the waiver, the application fee wasn't submitted. So that's why we thought it was good to get it out of the way early and not as part of the technical review.
Understood.
Right, so all applications, all applications of all types require a fee in advance of any kind of opinion. So regardless of any decision, the application fee would be due prior to that.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion on that? All right, seeing none or hearing none, the draft motion for waiver of application fee for the classification of new cell tower versus co-location. Whereas the applicant Young Summer LLC on behalf of Verizon Wireless has proposed a special use permit in coordination with their proposed utility pole supporting an equipment cabinet and antenna as a small wireless facility. Whereas the proposal is located off of exit 9 from I-90 Route 4 interchange near the property located at 25 Hampton Inn Drive. Whereas the town of East Greenbush local ordinance number 6 of 2004 classifies the proposal as a tower as determined by Kevin Hitchcock, code enforcement officer, in his letter dated December 20, 2022. Whereas the applicant is looking for a waiver consistent with the provisions of the wireless code section 47A-28 of the new cell tower fee of $5,000 to a reduction to $2,500, the fee for a co-location, which is more commensurate with the reduced complexity of the wooden pole in lieu of a steel tower typically used. Therefore, the Town of East Greenbush Zoning Board of Appeals hereby recommends that the applicant be granted a waiver of the special use permit application fee from $5,000 to $2,500. This resolution was moved by Jeff Pangburn and seconded by Scott Stravell. I saw the hand. Thank you. At a meeting duly held on February 28, 2023. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, a vote was taken as follows. Tom Hickey,
Yes.
Matt Ostagai,
Yes.
Jeff Pangburn, yes. Bob Seward III,
Yes.
Scott Stravell.
Yes,
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. With that, David, anything else you wish to add before we table the public hearing to March 28th at the earliest?
No, I have nothing else to add other than to thank you for your consideration of that waiver request. We will get a check out this week over to Allison, and we look forward to seeing you again on the 28th.
good job, David.
All right, thank you all, and hopefully the rest of your evening goes quickly.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Did Jeff lock up?
It looks like he is.
It does look like it, yep.
Yeah, I don't hear anything. So, and he, at least he's looking good when he locked up.
Here we go.
He was
I'm sure I'll
really
log back in.
focused.
Probably trying to dial in again right now.
We will give him a minute or more.
And I'm going to attempt to drop my phone and join the audio on the Zoom. So if you get a request, let me in. Okay.
Okay, will do.
Thanks. If this screws up, I apologize.
No problem.
I thought we had figured all this technical stuff out.
I get the feeling that Jeff has to restart his computer.
There
Could
he
be.
is.
Could be. He's back.
Scott, you're muted.
But at the same time, if someone's
Did we lose everybody or was it just me?
Just you.
Shoot, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. My signal just dropped out. Dave was just saying thank you and all of a sudden it froze. All right, sorry about that. We're back. So David's good. He's gone.
I have to make the joke. Do you have Verizon?
I know. Did you make the joke? I gotta go back and listen.
I know. No, I wish I did.
No, actually, no, it was Spectrum. So good point. That was Spectrum, not Verizon's fault. So with that said, let me just get going again. Public hearing, we will open Zoning Board of Appeals number 2023-02 Barner 9 Eileen Drive. Area variance for a garage. We'll read the legal notice. Please take notice that the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of East Greenbush will hold a public hearing on February 28th, 2023, beginning at 7:30-ish to consider the following application. Appeal number 2023-02, the appeal of Harry Barner of 9 Eileen Drive, Rensselaer, New York, 12144. The applicant proposes the construction of a 32-foot by 28-foot garage attached to an existing shed in the rear yard. The review of the proposed work will not comply with the following provisions of the town's comprehensive zoning law, specifically section 2.6.6 residential district. The required side setback is 8 feet in the R2 zoning district, and the proposed side setback is 3 feet. Therefore, the proposed action requires an area variance for the property located at 9 Eileen Drive, East Greenbush, New York, tax map number 155.5-2-2. With that, we also have Rensselaer County notification of zoning review action. Please be advised that the Rensselaer County Bureau of Economic Development and Planning, after having carefully reviewed the information submitted as part of the subject referral, the Bureau of Economic Development and Planning has determined that the proposal does not have a major impact on county plans and that local consideration shall prevail. We also have the Planning Board supplemental report dated February 6th, 2023 as part of the record, and the Planning Board recommendation of February 9th, 2023, where the Planning Board makes a negative recommendation for the area variance based on the report submitted today. So with that, I'd like to invite the applicant, Mr. Barner. Thank you for your patience tonight. I'd like to turn it over to you if you can review the proposal. Ideally, the 5 criteria needed for the area variance and why you feel it's necessary or and wish to receive the variance. Thank you.
There is a shed that's been existing on the property for quite a while, which is only 3 foot from the edge. And that's why I wanted to build this one flush with, it's an addition onto that shed. So I thought it would be a lot better to have the new garage flush with the shed.
You had indicated that there's a new concrete slab going in, is that correct?
It would be an Alaskan slab, yes.
Alaskan slab. Now, the dimensions on one of the applications indicated that was bigger than the garage. Is that correct? I think it's, yeah, actually your submittal says it's 38 feet by 28 feet.
Mm-hmm.
The slab, and the garage is 32 by 28.
Correct. Has an apron around the garage.
Is it 3 foot in front of the garage, 3 foot back? Because the width is the same, correct? 28 feet and 28 feet, so the sides are exact?
Correct. There's an overhang in the back on the shed. And so that's a little bit in the back to have a slightly larger slab, and then a little bit more on the front, just as an apron in front of the garage.
I'll just ask questions of the board members. Anybody want to start?
Yeah, how old is that shed, Mr. Barner? That you'll be connecting into?
I've been in this neighborhood all my life, and this house was built in 72. I don't remember it being built. I'm assuming it was built along with the original structure in 72.
Okay.
Mr. Barner, are you going to connect the garage to the shed? Because if you got a 3-foot concrete pad, I mean, how are you going to connect into that shed? Is it going to be an actual connection or just they're going to be one behind each other?
Yeah, the shed is a little bit shorter, so there's going to be a gable going from the gable roof of the shed over to the garage for water runoff. And then there'd be a small area because of the overhang of the roof. And yes, they would connect.
Now, the shed in the rear the roof pitches towards the street. I'm assuming the garage roof would be the opposite, correct? It would sheet
Correct.
towards the neighbor's property in the center of your rear yard?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Barner, is that shed on a slab or is it movable at all?
It is on a slab.
It is, okay.
I don't think that answered whether it was movable or not, though.
No, it's fastened to the slab. Anchored.
And this is probably an internal question. We don't have any record of a prior variance request on this, correct?
I did not inquire. We don't have anything in the record indicating such, but no. In my 10 or 12 years, I don't remember this property coming up before. No.
Yeah, and that was the reason why I'd asked Jeff when that shed was placed in there, because if it was recent, my next question was, where's the variance for the shed?
So the other piece is it doesn't seem like you have an exact known property line on this yet. There's assumptions of where the property line is because you have a front pin located, but not a rear pin located, correct?
Correct.
So we're putting it within 3 feet of an unknown property line.
When I ran a line back from the pin that I found next to the road, it appeared that it was 3 feet from that.
Yeah, but you ran it back to what? Because there's no known back pin.
I made it a right angle to the road.
And it seems there's a pretty significant overhang on the sides of that existing shed now. Does that actually overhang the property line? Are we talking about the base of it? Are we talking about the roof peak that is within 3 feet of the property line?
No, the shed itself within 3 feet. The slab that it's on is within 3 feet.
And is that eave? It seems that it's a pretty substantial eave on the sides, isn't
Yeah,
it?
the peak runs out quite a ways, yeah.
So it may be possible, if not likely, that the actual current piece, even though the slab is at 3 feet, that the roof line could be actually over the other property line. Over the
I
property.
don't, no, that is not a 3-foot overhang on that peak. It's about 2 feet that it sticks out on that peak.
Mr. Barner, I think your sketch calls out a 14 by 16 shed that's existing. But
Yes.
that's interior space. That doesn't include the roof overhangs, correct?
That doesn't include the roof. It's I measured the outside walls.
Outside walls. Thank you.
Mr. Barner, other than aesthetics, and I know you want to align them, if we were to move the garage over to comply with code, I just want to have a discussion. What would be the downside of that, other than you're going to come down and you're going to see the shed sticking out a certain amount, looking back from the road?
It would still fit on the property.
The garage, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So the aesthetic piece is looking at the one piece of the shed that's gonna, and the roof overhang, as Tom was pointing out, as you're looking back from the existing road,
To
looking back
line
at the
up
garage.
those walls, so there wouldn't
I
be a
gotcha.
step.
I got you.
Mr. Barner, your first sketch of the proposed location, it looks like your two side yard neighbors, their property line meets kind of where this garage is going to meet the existing shed. Is that correct?
It is close. That's the 3 foot. Oh, yeah, the corner there of my brother-in-law's property and the Rose property, yes.
Now, that's an
And they
interesting-
both have sheds in that corner.
Yeah, well, that's
busy
what I
corner.
bring up. They, the planning board member mentioned that they appear to meet the 8-foot offset. Which property is your brother-in-law's?
The one on 5 Eileen Drive.
Okay. And you mentioned Rose was the owner of number 8.
Yeah, Brad Rose lives on the Steffi Lane one.
Okay. And have you approached either of those two neighbors?
My sister and brother-in-law have no problem with this, and I believe the person from the zoning board that came and looked at it talked with him about it. I have not talked to Mr. Rose about it.
Thank you.
But I know that registered letters were sent out to everyone within the vicinity.
I have 100% confidence that they were sent out, right, Allison? I just don't have 100% confidence they actually got delivered by our US Postal Service, but we did our part. Okay.
I know a bunch of the neighbors did talk to me about it, so a bunch of them got it.
Okay, good. Good to hear. And actually, from Brad Rose's standpoint, looking at the aerial that was provided, the second sketch, it appears like this won't be visible from his property because it's past his property line and tucked in kind of behind his auxiliary building that he's got there and your brother-in-law's shed.
Correct.
You plan to take the tree down between the driveway and the new garage?
There is no tree there.
Oh, the tree's gone. Okay, that's right. I'm looking at the old sketch.
There was no tree there.
Thought I saw on the maps.
Yeah.
There's a
It's on
stump
the old
further
Google
forward
Street
to the
View.
road.
Google drove through about 5 or 6 years ago, I think, and it showed an old maple there.
Oh, that maple was taken down several years ago.
Okay, that's what I thought.
What's the height of the shed that or the garage you're proposing?
Oh, I put it on the plan. I don't have it in front of me. Do you
you're
have that, Jeff, on the plan right there?
I'm not seeing height.
I don't remember seeing a height of it.
No, I thought, I'm pretty sure I put it on there.
It's saying 2x6 Raptors, 16 inches on center,
I believe it's 24 foot.
24 feet.
Yeah.
So it's going
Yes.
to be, and is there going to be, is it going to be living space above it, storage space above it? What's gonna
No,
be
storage
second floor?
space.
Storage space.
So basically at that height and width, you're not going to see the shed behind there at all, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, from the road.
As long as they're lined up.
Yeah.
All right. right, any other questions from the board before I open up to the public?
None,
Yeah.
Jeff.
Just really quick, is there gonna be a paved road into the garage? I can't tell by the drawing, or is that,
I'm gonna eventually redo my driveway and have the driveway go to the garage
okay.
as money allows.
Phased approach.
But the garage is, I've got a 64 Chevy and a Model T truck, and they don't come in and out very often, and that's why there's no rush on paving that.
I'm good, Jeff, sorry.
No, that's good. Thank you. With that, any members of the public wish to speak on this appeal tonight? There's a long comment. Kateri, do you have it? Do you want me to read it still, or are you good to with it? I'll read it. That's fine. Mr. Barner has made the required process and effort to go through the process of applying for a building permit. Building inspector Kevin Hitchcock has done his due diligence. Mr. Barner has filed a request for variances. It's highly possible that many people in the town of East Greenbush go ahead with building projects that don't bother to do so. If there are no neighbors that object to his project, and if the boundaries of his property can be established by a certified survey, I say allow the variance. There are other notable entities in the town that have gone ahead and built major structures without a building permit. One example that comes to mind is a large canopy structure in the back of Martin Electric and back of the old Kmart building that never was approved or permitted by the town of East Greenbush. Comment from town residents. With that, any other questions from the public? Seeing no other public, thank you. Mr. Hesney, it is interesting conundrum if we don't know where the side property line actually is. Is it the property owner's gamble, or is it something that the probably code enforcement or building inspector would need to see before permitting? If we permit a 3-foot offset from the property line, you're gonna need to know where that property line is, correct?
Well, again, it does create an unknown factor in this application because there is no survey showing the improvements. Now, I did look up the tax map for this particular property, and it does appear that as far as the sidelines and the front lines does appear to be right angles, but doesn't show the structures that are on the property. So there's no way to know with any certainty, you know, where the property lines, you know, truly lie. And the sidelines on this property, I think on the side where this proposed garage would be, is at least shown on the tax map as being perhaps 125 feet long. So it does create an unknown factor that is not being answered because the survey has not been done.
I'm leaning towards some of our prior precedents where it becomes almost a building codes / building department concern and not necessarily ours. If we issue a variance for 3 feet, that's the variance the applicant is awarded. It's up to them to fulfill that requirement or it's out of compliance. But I would imagine a building inspector would want to see a site plan of that. So I think we'll leave it as a reference or a referral over to code enforcement to pursue.
Okay.
All right. With that, any other questions from the board?
None. For me.
Seeing or hearing none. Mr. Barner, anything else you wish to add?
So if I can find the pin, the surveyor's pin back there, that would help with this as far as the code enforcement.
Yep, absolutely. Anything else? Okay. Seeing or hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Seward. Do I have a second? By Mr. Hickey. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Mr. Barner, that'll be the end of our back and forth tonight. You're more than welcome to stay on.
Thank you.
Yep, and listen in. So with that, I will open actually as an area variance for a residential lot. I will make note that this meets the requirements of a seeker type 2 action, and no further seeker processing is needed. So with that, I will open it up to discussion and deliberation amongst the members. Anyone wish to start?
I fundamentally have a problem with a piece of property where the structure that exists is out of code in some fashion, where it may actually or may not be on his own property and overhangs the other property, and we want a variance for aesthetics on a dead-end street that there's only, I think, 4 houses past him on. So fundamentally, I'm challenged by that.
Tom, I'm with you going into it. I had no idea how old that shed was, and I'm not even sure if that shed is it against zoning? Is it a pre-existing non-conforming? You know, because if it was built like he's inferring that it was back in the 70s, I don't even know what the zoning was back then, Jeff. I mean, do you have a sense of that? Was it still 8 feet?
Don't recall, yeah.
Yeah, we don't know. I'm with you, Tom. He's got plenty of room to put it wherever, you know, and not wherever, to meet the zoning, so he doesn't have to have a variance. I know his brother-in-law and sister live next door, and they have no problem with it, but inherently pieces of property change hands, other people move in. Now you have a non-conforming structure dumping rainwater onto the property based on the pitch of the roof, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I find some problems with it myself. Why should we follow a bigger structure because a smaller structure is sitting in non-conformance?
Yeah, and timing on that, Bob, too, if you look at it, it's very similar architecture as to the house to the left of it. Very similar stonework and everything. And he has some form of structure out in the center of his backyard, has a fireplace and has like a gathering area that has a similar stone structure. This shed doesn't appear to align with any of that. And from his drawing, it doesn't even actually look like the shed is lined up with the property line. It looks to be a bit off
Center.
off square.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I can't say whether it was at the time of construction. I can't say when it was. It just doesn't appear to have been constructed at the same time as the house from my layman's perspective.
Yeah, we've been talking right angles. I don't think it runs parallel to the property line. Hey, lots of considerations here. You know, I echo, Tom, what you and Bob have said. Dead end, lightly traveled street, very busy little corner back there. The lack of a real true pin back there is a concern, plus all the other things you guys have said. But this is one where he clearly has other options. He's got room to slide that left of where he needs to be to comply with the zoning law, even though it's a quiet dead end street. And based on that, if it's aesthetics, again, it's a quiet dead end street, very lightly traveled. he can put a bush in front of it. Right? There's lots of ways to handle the aesthetics if you're concerned about the view from the street. At the end of the day, he's putting two beautiful cars in that thing. And if it's over 5 feet, I think we're doing our job if we kind of go with that.
I'm going to jump in and be the contrarian on this one. And, I do think aesthetics weigh into it. I hear all the concerns and I get it. I know we're trying to say, if you don't need a variance, don't do a variance. But if the variance makes for a better project with no real harm, why not? I mean, literally there's, I think, 3 houses that drive past this property, 4 maybe. And that's it. It's not a town-wide visibility issue. I think a brand new garage hiding a 40, 50-year-old shed that's been modified over time is a benefit to me. As I drive by to my house down the end of that street, if I have to see it, and the garage hides that shed that's probably well past its prime, it's kind of a benefit to me. It is his brother-in-law next door, and it is a large side lot on that property next door where the house is set quite a ways back. Buyer beware, if he reduces his property value or his brother-in-law's property value decreases because the garage is a little closer, I think, self-inflicted wound there. But I think just the fact that the garage is going to hide that shed is a benefit to me. And I think that shed was probably built, we know all the time sheds have gone up over time without anybody ever knowing or being permitted. Who knows, that might have been the case here. The thing, I hate to say it, 1972 garage is basically as old as I am. So, or the shed, excuse me. And it is a nice property. I echo whoever said it. The stone on that property, the fire pit and gazebo that was built in the back is architecturally really well done. So I have a feeling that this garage is also going to look well. But yeah, that's where I am.
Yeah, I could throw in an ad. I guess I came in thinking the same thing. The parts that stuck with me is how far back it is. It's not like it's on the road where you're going to notice it from that perspective. I think that's a pretty sizable. That was important to me. To your point, I think it's going to look a lot better. And we're talking 3 feet versus 8 feet here. We've had much larger variances from that perspective. And the fact that they're kind of in the corner, I think that's almost a good thing, quite honestly, because they're outside the purview of the yard. The fact he's going to tie his driveway to it, I thought that was a positive. I think it's going to look better. And maybe I'm ADD, but if my shed was 5 feet off of the one behind it, I'd probably drive me crazy. I do that. That does kind of that. If I'm pulling every day and I'm seeing that offset, that, Scott, your point about the tree, that might help me. But other than that, I do feel like that would be a problem to me. And I think given where it's at, it's probably not going to be as, I don't think it's going to be necessarily a negative impact to the taking the true definition of the area variance to the neighborhood. I just don't see that. So that's kind of how I was showing up on it, honestly, guys. So
I did make note, and I do think it is important because we've seen it in a tighter setback, that we make sure that none of the drainage runs off into the neighbor's yard, that it's handled through their own means. So whichever way this goes. The other piece of it is pushing it is a large garage, and I'm looking at the aerial image he provided, which I'm glad he did, the perspective of, pushing that garage further over towards the middle of the yard is potentially, going to create a little bit of a setback. I don't want to use the word setback, a distance concern between the primary house and this garage structure too. So I think, shoving it 5 feet over closer to the house actually might make it look a little odder. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I go back to the 5 points, and on this one, I'm having trouble with 3 of the 5. And normally from my perspective, I tend to lean on the point if it's 1 or 2. I tend to lean towards, but it's clearly self-created. There's clearly other options to satisfy it. And the question is whether, you consider this to be a substantial variance. It's a 60% variance to take it from 8 feet down to 3 feet. So it depends on your perspective. It's easy to say it's just 5 feet, but it's a 60% variance on that. So for me, when I'm looking at these and I look at the 5 criteria, I'm challenged on 3 out of the 5 on this one. And that's on top of the fact that we're talking about a structure that's already out of code, depending on when it was built and what the code was at the time, that we don't even know that it's on the property line. We don't know that which point of the base is close to the property line. And I got to tell you, that looks like more than a 2-foot overhang when I went to visit it. I think it actually may impede over the property line as it sits now. All of those things give me significant pause on this one.
Yeah, I had the same 3 circled, Tom, 2, 3, and 5 as no's for me. And the one thing that's different here for me versus a lot of the other stuff, and I haven't been on as long as you guys on the zoning board, is there's what I think is an alternative here. A lot of times we don't have feasible or alternatives. But I get the counterpoints as well. I mean, those are very well stated. So just gonna make a decision when the time comes.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, there is a feasible construction method, but that feasible construction method doesn't hide the shed. So I could see number 2 going either way. I mean, you're going to be left with an ugly shed sticking out from the side, the rear of the garage off to the side. And then, so that's, yeah, I get it. I agree. It seems plausible, the point about, a 5-foot variance on an 8-foot requirement is substantial numbers wise. However, with the large side yard, I think it's mitigated by, the neighboring property, which again, nobody showed up for tonight. And it's not a popularity contest, but when the neighbors don't seem to worry about it, it does weigh on me.
Yeah, I think we have an obligation to think of the future neighbors as well. I know when people buy a property, they buy it in that condition when they buy it.
Right.
But, but we also have an obligation to know that any of these things survive current ownership. And when we look at that, when you buy a property, you're like, all right, I already know it's there. I'm making this decision to buy it with it there. And I get that, but we also have an obligation to not just say, well, the guys next door doesn't care. They would, it's a family. You wouldn't think they would care. So
yeah, and again, to me, it's a weight of the variance. Who's it harming? What's the harm? And some potential future property owner has no bearing kind of on what we do today. It's their choice. Like I said, choose to buy or not buy. I do think the drainage sheeting off onto a neighboring property is something that is physical harm, but you can build with 0-foot setbacks in some zones. This one's a little different, so.
Yeah, I kind of think about it like those neighbors that the 4 that are past him have been driving by that ugly shed for who knows how long. So putting a garage up in front, and whether it's parallel or there's a little 5-foot offset, we're going to be looking at a nicer structure out in front. And if they're looking right as they go by, they might see a little bit of an offset. Or he can fix it and make the offset look as nice as the front of the garage, if that's what he plans to do.
he could side it to match the garage. He could shingle it to match the garage. There's workarounds on that from my perspective, whether it's a tree, whether it's that. I think there's options. I think that's my whole thing on this. With some of these is, for me, you take the 3 criteria that I'm struggling with. You take that there's a lot of available options to do this. And then you take that it's we're trying to appease an already non-compliant structure. And I'm,
Well, we also look at their zoning, you know, and just giving a variance for the sake of giving a variance because that's where somebody wants to put something. You know, and when, as Scott mentioned, there is a reasonable and compliant alternatives to it. And quite honestly, we do a lot of garages. And my own opinion, I've driven by after some of the garages we've approved. It doesn't look as good as advertised, you know, there's a reason why we have this zoning, and it has to do with density and character of the neighborhoods and what have you. And just giving a variance when there's reasonable alternatives is, I struggle with that.
I think we give the aesthetic, I think we tend to weigh heavily on that one most of the time, right? And that one to me seems to be where we spend a lot of our decision making around how does it look, right? And that's the part that's kind of got me hooked on it, is that it's not uncommon for us to make that the prime. Hey, boy, it looks nice. It's lined up right. I mean, and half the time these guys bring this in front of us is to line things up. I mean, how many times I'm going to line up the back of my house? I'm going to line up, because the sight lines are so important to folks as they think about it. Because you and I drive by it once a year. They lived in it every single day. They're pulling in that yard, in their yard, which they own, and if it doesn't impact anybody else, I think we should weigh that with significance. That's kind of how I think about it. So to your point,
I kind of, you know, I agree with that, but with the same token, and I think you do the same, Matt, is where's the harm in issuing the variance? Is anybody harmed by this? And I can tell you, in my 51 years of existence, I've been on that street twice in my life. First time was for the variance on the corner where we did the in-law apartment, and the second time was to look at this garage site. So, you know, it's a dead-end street. And, you know, we just gave a variance for a side yard. I think we just did 2 garage side yard variances on 2 properties within the last year, one off Luther Road, one behind the old Yips. It's, you know, and I think it's not a variance for no reason. So I want to correct the record of that statement. I think it's a variance for aesthetic reasons, like Matt mentioned. We don't have to choose to accept that, but that's the request. He's not choosing to pick 3 feet out of the air. It's to align with the shed. So I do have a concern, Tom, to your point, that the sketch looks great if it lines with the shed behind it, but if the shed roof sticks out another 3 feet from where he says it does, then it blows it out of the water. You know, the shed's got to be hidden behind the garage, in my opinion.
yeah, when I drove by it, I assumed both sheds were out of compliance, frankly, because they were so close together. And that means that, you know, and we were only going by the, you know, supplemental report from the planning board on that it appears that the other one is in compliance, and boy, it just doesn't look like there's even 8 feet between those with the roof. When you look at it, those are on top of each other, but they exist and they're there. Like you said, people put their sheds up all the time. Some ask for permission, some don't. And on that street, frankly, nobody probably ever asked for permission because nobody drives down it, like you said. So I'm guessing that his beautiful structure that he has out back, that was just built, and you know, and it's not uncommon on those less traveled streets that people aren't as aggressive in their, you know, desire to get a permit.
So if this were to go through and we say yes, and just speaking hypothetically, the new garage wall aligns with the existing shed wall. Again, we can debate the right angleness of it all, but that roof is still going to overhang, and we're going to see that aesthetically beyond the edge of that front garage, right? I think the answer is yes to that.
You know,
Unless he's cutting it off.
The only Well, that would be the only way I could see approving it, is that, you know, it is pitched that this garage is gonna hide the shed. You know, to do all this work, issue a 3-foot variance and see the shed roof stick out 3 feet beyond the edge of the garage kills the reason to approve this, in my opinion, for me.
Anybody go to Google Street View?
Yes, I have it up.
One thing, looking at it today, on Google Street View, you can't even see the shed.
Yeah, it's very back there.
So
The
when
trees
we're talking
there.
about, when you're talking about aesthetics from the Google Street View, again, there's no leaves on the trees, there's no flowers on the bushes and everything today when we go look at it at this time of year. But from Google Street View, you can't see that shed. So I'm not sure how, 9 months out of the year, the aesthetics even plays except for him.
I don't know, this one might be a split decision. I don't know which way it goes.
Split decisions aren't a bad thing regardless of
No.
which direction they go. And it means that we're having healthy debate and we're,
Totally agree.
being thoughtful.
We've looked at it from all angles. That's what it says.
Yeah,
Hey, Jeff, just real quick before you go there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, isn't Kevin the one, isn't Kevin the one setting the 3 foot and what does he typically measure off? Does he measure off the wall? I mean, I think we got the applicant's purview of how it's measured off the setback, but what does Kevin typically do? Does he measure off the furthest point nearest the setback? So would he measure off the roof or, you know what I'm saying? Like it's raising a good point how that works,
I believe it's the applicant's application and
says it?
request to ask for the 3 feet. So Kevin looks at the site plan and says, oh, you're saying you're 3 foot off your property line, therefore you need a variance. You need 8, you're asking for 3.
Okay.
So you need a variance for the 5 feet. Now, Kevin has also made decisions in the past that unless it's a physical structure, that projections into the setback don't count. So he would probably, I believe, take the walls of the shed as the existing structure, not the roof overhang.
Okay, I was just curious. It just raised a good point. I never really thought about it, right? So that's interesting. So
That's a good question, Matt, because based on that and based on the right angle of the property line and the way the shed is, I'm just looking at the picture again. The back right corner of the proposed garage is going to be what's closest to the property line. The front right is going to be a little farther away because it's not a true,
yeah,
if he truly wants to stay parallel with the shed is not parallel to the property line. To Bill's point before, or whoever said he was running right angles on the tax map.
Mhm. Yeah.
Roll the dice, Jeff, or what do you want to do?
I'll roll the dice. I think I've got, this is not going to be a simple one. This is going to be conditioned a few different ways, so bear with me. Any other discussion? All right. Hearing none, I will start with a resolution and final decision of Board of Appeals, appeal number 2023-02, in the matter by Harry Barner for an area variance. Whereas an application has been filed by Harry Barner of 9 Eileen Drive, Rensselaer, New York, 12144. The applicant proposes the construction of a 32-foot by 28-foot garage attached to an existing shed in the rear yard. The review of the proposed work will not comply with the following provisions of the town's comprehensive zoning law, specifically section 2.6.6 residential district. The required side setback is 8 feet in the R2 zoning district, and the proposed side setback is 3 feet. And whereas the applicant has filed an application requesting an area variance at the property located at 9 Eileen Drive, East Greenbush, New York, tax map number 155.5-2-2. And whereas the Board of Appeals has duly published a notice of public hearing regarding this appeal in the record on February 17th, 2023, and remaining whereases by reference. Resolved that the Board of Appeals makes the following findings of fact in regards to the side setback of 3 feet for the proposed 32-foot by 28-foot garage attached to an existing shed in the rear yard. 1, there will not be an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood, as there is a pre-existing shed located with the same setback that this garage would blend into, as well as neighboring auxiliary structures on the adjacent properties that appear to be close to the property lines. 2, there is no other method available to the applicant in order to hide the rear shed and make it not visible from the street. 3, the requested variance is substantial as it is a request of 5 feet from the necessary 8 to equal the 3. However, the adjacent structure has a large setback to the side property line and therefore will blend into the character of the neighborhood. 4, the proposed variance will not have an adverse effect on the neighborhood as it will match the existing shed in the corner of the yard. 5, the alleged difficulty is self-created. However, that shall not necessarily preclude the granting of the area variance. Resolved that the application for the proposed 32 by 28-foot garage attached to an existing shed in the rear yard with a 3-foot side setback be granted with 3 conditions. 1, the applicant collect and direct any roof runoff away from the neighboring property and either maintain on-site or through the rear yard or front street drainage. 2, that no portion of the existing shed behind the garage shall extend beyond the side wall of the proposed garage. 3, that the garage be constructed parallel to the property line at a distance no closer than the corner of the existing shed. This resolution was moved by Jeff Pangburn. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Matt Ostagai at a meeting duly held on February 28, 2023. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing or hearing none, a vote was taken as follows. Tom Hickey,
No.
Matt Ostagai,
Yes.
Jeff Pangburn, yes. Bob Seward,
No.
Scott Stravell.
No,
All right. Anybody want to make a motion then to deny?
I'm not sure I've ever done it.
Jeff, do we have to make a motion to deny
Yep.
by voting it down? We
The motion didn't carry,
didn't carry.
so we have no decision at this point.
You have the, do you have the sample file that you can share
Yes.
that I can go off of?
Yes.
Yeah, I would need that.
I definitely need that. I gotta look at it for a minute too.
Yeah, that's the problem, not being in person.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We had talked about once upon a time that possibly sharing them in advance, so we had them in hand kind of thing. Those templates.
Well, it's the same template every time. The only difference is the intro part. So you could just jump into the whereases if you are the resolve part of it.
Yeah, can you just read the 5 criteria?
You're making grand assumptions that I don't need this file in front of me, Jeff. You're giving me way too
Yeah.
much credit.
Yeah, I
Check
don't
your
have it
email. Check your email. No, but I mean, the 5 criteria, the resolve part's exactly the same, so. I can always help with any of the
Yep,
other.
I'm waiting for it to come through. You sent it to town one, or you sent it to my regular work one? I always get it on the Covanta.
Covanta.
Tom, you could pull up the website too. It's on the website. It's attached to the agenda.
You're all giving me way too much credit, so I'll wait for the email to come through.
It went to your Covanta email.
Yeah, it just hasn't popped yet. It hasn't even come on. My watch always comes first, then my phone, and then my computer. So I'm waiting.
Actually, you know what I could probably
Can you see
do?
the screen?
That's what I was just gonna do is share the screen. Thank you. Use technology. Thank you, Anna.
Can you go up? And I'll go from the beginning.
On
Do I not need to, Jeff?
no need, Katira, you could pick up all the whereases by reference, correct? You're muted, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm on my iPad. I don't know how to unmute on this.
That's all right, you're good.
Yeah, I mean, right now I could look at it and read it myself and just do it. Or just send me, I have a copy of that. I can do it later. Otherwise, you have to read it for me to get it on record.
Just came
You can.
through.
What's that, Tom?
It just came through. I'll read it. Okay, I'll give this my best shot. I haven't had a chance to give it thought.
But you answered the 5 criteria, Tom. So just go with what you had for 2, 3, and 5.
No, I will, but I've got the whereases in front of me here just for Terry's benefit. So whereas an application has been filed by Harry Barner of 9 Eileen Drive, Rensselaer, New York, 12144. The applicant proposes the construction of a 32 by 28 garage attached to an existing shed in the rear yard. The review of the proposed work will not comply with the following provisions of the town's comprehensive zoning law, specifically section 2.6.6 residential district. The required side setback is 8 feet in the R2 zoning district, and the proposed side setback is 3 feet. And whereas the applicant has filed an application requesting an area variance at the property located at 9 Eileen Drive, East Greenbush, New York, tax map number 155.5-2-2, and whereas the Board of Appeals has duly published a notice of public hearing regarding this appeal in the record on February 17th, 2023, and whereas notice of the public hearing was provided by certified mail to the owners of all property within 200 feet of the land involved in the application, to the Town Planning Board, and to the Rensselaer County Bureau of Economic Development and Planning. And whereas a public hearing was held by the Board of Appeals.
Tom, I'm sorry. I did get all this. I thought when you're going to give the denials, I thought that's what he meant.
All right.
Oh, sorry.
You waited till I was 60% through.
Well, because I thought you were gonna like do each one and then say why you were denying it. So I don't know why he didn't. Yeah, okay.
No worries. Let me go to the next page. We'll figure it out.
There you go.
Okay.
I just need to know the 5 criteria and why and your denial.
All right. Resolved that the Board of Appeals makes the following findings of fact in regards to the side setback of 3 feet for the proposed 32 by 28 garage attached to an existing shed in the rear yard. There will not be an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood, as it has been existing as such for.
You want to say there will, right?
No,
Thought you said there will not be an undesirable change.
there will not be. Yeah.
Okay, that's what you are saying. Okay. I'm
So
sorry.
there will not be an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood, as the shed has been existing for some time and it will continue to be in the exact same place. There is other methods available to the applicant, as there is a large area behind the driveway to be able to construct the garage to meet the physical needs of the new structure. The requested variance is substantial, as it is only a 3 feet setback instead of an 8, which is a variance of 60% of the required setback. The proposed variance will not have an adverse effect on the neighborhood. The alleged difficulty is self-created, as there is other options for the location of the shed. This does not necessarily preclude the granting of the area variance. Resolved that the applicant for the proposed 32 by 28 garage attached to an existing shed in the rear yard with a 3-foot side setback be denied.
Period.
Period. This resolution was moved by Tom Hickey. Seconded by,
Scott Strabel.
at a meeting duly held on February 28th, 2023.
Any discussion on the motion? A yes vote is in agreement with the denial. Vote was taken as follows: Tom Hickey,
Yes.
Matt Ostagai,
No,
Jeff Pangburn, no. Bob Seward III,
Yes.
Scott Strabel.
Yes.
Motion to deny carries 3-2. And that's that. All right, with that, it was a long one. Let's go.
Has been.
Sorry about that, Tom.
And no worries, we're good.
It's all good.
Different than we usually do. We have approval of meeting minutes. Unfortunately, I just closed my agenda. Allison, do you remember which date those were?
February 14th.
Okay, February 14th meeting minutes. So I have a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that motion.
Actually, you're making the motion.
Oh, I'll make it. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you said you were making the motion, Jeff. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. Do I have a second now?
Yes, sir.
Either one of us. Doesn't matter.
I think I heard Tom Hickey first, sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries 5-0. With that, we do not have any other applications for tonight. The 14th, we do not have a quorum, so that meeting will be canceled March 14th. Tentatively, the only thing on the agenda for March 28th is Verizon. So we will schedule that for now, but we'll watch to see if they need to postpone that if they can't get all their information in order by then. Please do me a favor, go back through that application for the small cell wireless. There were a handful of waivers we will need to address from a technical basis to agree with them as part. Bill, offline, I think we're going to look for you. Can we roll all those waivers into an approval or denial resolution, or should they all be handled individually as separate motions? Just give it some thought. We don't need an answer now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff, where are those waivers again? I'm trying to,
They were worked into their application package. Their
oh, in
letters.
the 92 page thing. Yes.
Yeah, and the supplemental submission after that one.
Yep.
So yeah, yep, they're weaved in there a little bit. So we got to pull them out and figure out logistically the best way forward on those.
Hey, Jake.
I wanted to pull the application, obviously, as we talked, we pulled the application fee out separately as its own because it should have been handled as part of the application.
Just a heads up, if it matters, I'll be out of town on the 28th. So.
Okay. Everybody else appears good on the 28th.
For now, yeah.
I think so. Yep.
All right, sounds good. With that, entertain a motion to adjourn tonight.
I'll make that motion. Oh,
You always
listen to
do.
Bob Seward again, a second by Matt Ostaguy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Thank you, guys. Good night
See-
tonight.
See you guys later.
You know,
Take care.
Good night.
Bye.